presentation, we'll record transactions related to cash being received by the organization in the form of contributions and pledges that had been pledged in the past that are now being collected on within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our QuickBooks practice problem. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. We're now going to go down to our Excel sheet in order to see what our objective will be. First transaction is going to be this one on B2. B2 is going to be cash contributions without donor restrictions. So we're a school, we typically have tuition, but we may also have contributions. So that means our revenue is a little bit more complicated possibly than other types of not-for-profits that we've seen in the past where we may be relying mainly on contributions. In this case, we have the tuitions, and now we've got the contributions, which will be another type of revenue account. Cash then being received, we're going to be increasing the cash. Other side going to a revenue kind of type of account, that being contributions, no restrictions here, therefore contributions without donor restrictions. Recording this out then, we're going to say that the cash will then be increasing up top, so cash goes up. And notice we're still overdrawn here, that's okay. Don't worry, it'll be back in balance at some point. Well, we're going to make some money here. And then with the other side, it's going to be the contributions without restrictions. That's going to be an income type of account, not the tuition, but down here, the contributions without donor restrictions equals, that's going to be the credit, increasing in the credit direction, increasing in essence what would be basically the net income accounts. So there we have that. Now, in QuickBooks, we want to record, obviously, those transactions. We want to typically do it with a form. We would like to note that this is going to be a contribution without donor restrictions, not only by the account, but also by class, so that we can break that out in a format similar to the statement of activities, having the basically income statement broken out with those that have restrictions and those that do not. So to do that, we're going to go back to QuickBooks. Let's go back to our journal entry first. We want to pick this one up. Pick up the right number this time. I'm going to go back to the QuickBooks file. And what form are we going to use to do this? We're going to use the create the sales receipt. That will allow us to assign the class. It'll also give us something that we can provide to somebody, just like we did with other not-for-profit organizations. If they donate to us, we can then give them some kind of record of that. We would like to be able to provide that. We would like to be able to print a list of the people who have donated money to us. So we're going to go to the create sales receipt. You could adjust the type of forms by adjusting the templates, or you can go to the formatting tab and adjust this name at the least by going to the customize the data layout and then changing that top field, possibly just calling it a donation form, and then say okay. And you could have multiple templates as well. We'll talk a little bit more about templates in a future presentation so that you can basically customize the type of templates to be able to provide something back. You want your receipts to look really nice to the donors. At least we can give them a nice thank you, receipt to track their records if they're going to give us a donation. So we're going to call this a donor 2 tab. Quick setup, and again, this would be the name of the donor. We're going to say the class here is going to be unrestricted as the class, tab, going to make the date as of the 9th, tab, and then we're going to pick the item, and the item is going to be the donation. Now note, we only have the restricted item here. Now I'm going to make a donation unrestricted. So then tab, we're going to say yes, and services. And this, of course, the difference here is that I want it to go to the income statement account, the income account that will be not restricted. So the restricted one will be going to the contributions restricted. We want this one to be going to contributions unrestricted. Then we're going to say okay. And tab, and the amount is going to be, if we go back to Excel and pick up the proper amount this time, the 2390. It's going to be the 2390. Class is going to be the unrestricted. So when we record this, what is it going to be doing? It's going to be a donation, which is basically a sales receipt. That will then increase the undeposited funds. So in essence, a cash type of account. Then the other side is going to be going to where we've driven this item, which is a revenue type of account, which will be unrestricted. Let's check it out. We're going to say save and close. We're going to say yes. Take a look at our trustee trial balance first. Now also note that the little number 1 happened here. We haven't yet put it into the checking account. We'll have to deal with that as well. I'm going to not do it right now, and then we'll see this transaction, and then we'll group more than one item together for the cash increasing so we can get an idea of that grouping process. We're going to go back up top. We're going to go to the reports. We're going to go down to the accounting and taxes. We're going to take a look at the trustee trial balance. Within the trustee trial balance, we'll change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. That's January through December. We see that we have the undeposited funds increasing here, undeposited funds. They haven't gone to the checking account, but in essence, cash increasing. Double clicking on that, there's our sales receipt, which we've renamed to a donation. Closing this back out. The other side then going to our income account. It's going to be the income account, which is unrestricted in the form of contributions, unrestricted. So here's our unrestricted contributions. Double clicking on that, there's our sales receipt once again. Closing this back out, then we'll go to our reports in terms of the income statement by class. Reports drop down, company and financial. We're going to go to the profit and loss by class. Changing the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. You can see that that's going to be included, the new item, in the contributions that are unrestricted contributions. Now let's go back to our Excel and see our next transaction. If we go back to Excel, we're going to say I'm going to make that one blue. I'm going to highlight it, make it blue because we've done that, and move to this one and make it green because that's the one we are doing. And we're going to do the ones that are green. So this one, we're going to say this is on C. It's coming from here, contributions to the endowment. So now we're receiving cash, but we're saying that there's going to be a restriction, and it's a restriction related to the endowment. So what that means then is that cash is going to be increasing, cash is going to be going up, and then we're going to have the credit being to an income kind of account, a contribution. However, it's going to be restricted. And then I want to basically be able to list the type of restriction, and it's going to be related to the endowment. That's what we're going to use the job fields for within QuickBooks. So if we record this here in like kind of our two-dimensional type of area, we're going to go back up top, and we're going to say that cash is going to be going up, double-clicking cash, going to the end of it, plus. We're going to debit the cash for the $350. Cash then increases. The other side then going to contributions with restrictions. So we have the contributions here with the restrictions, and this is a time restriction. We're going to go with the endowment. I'm just going to have one account when we go into QuickBooks for the restricted items. We're going to be increasing the $350. So there's that increase. Now here, note that we needed two basically accounts to tell us the kind of restriction that we had. When we combine it to the profit and loss by activity, then usually we just group everything up. The requirement here is to generally group everything up into restricted and not restricted, or without donor restrictions and with donor restrictions. So therefore, this report's not going to give us the detail about the types of restrictions that are there. How are we going to deal with this in QuickBooks? We'll still generate this report, which will be similar to a profit and loss by class, grouping all restricted items. Then we'll create a profit and loss by job, which will break out those restrictions. And that's where we will get the more detail about the types of restrictions, being the time restrictions and the endowment restrictions. So that's the main thing we want to get when we go to the QuickBooks file. Just kind of, we want to try to work on envisioning how QuickBooks tools, the job costs, the jobs, and the classes will help us to give more, detail, kind of more dimensions to the type of reports. So let's see what that'll look like. We're gonna go back to QuickBooks. We're gonna go to the Home tab, and then we collected cash again. So what's gonna happen here? We got cash and we got a contribution. That's gonna be basically a create sales receipt form. And so we're going to have a similar type of starting point there. I'm going to put into the customer or job field the donor endowment, and we're going to set up a new customer for this to track another time restriction. I just want to be able to show within the job reports how we can track different breakout of jobs. So we're going to add a new item here. Typically, an endowment would be something that would be a contribution of a lump sum, and then maybe the interest on it or the earnings on it would have to be used for a specific type of purpose. So oftentimes, if you have income that's related to an endowment, it's also if it's related to something that had already been set up in a similar fashion as the job we had set up for the school supplies. However, I want to create another job here just to show multiple jobs and how we would track them to get a good idea of the look between the profit and loss by classes and profit and loss by jobs. So I'm going to select tab. We're going to set that up with the quick add. The class is going to be restricted, so it's going to be restricted for the endowment. I'll make this as on the 12th. We're going to go then to the item, and the item is going to be the donation that is restricted. Now, we're not going to be choosing the type of restriction here. Notice I'm not choosing a timing restriction versus some other type of restriction, because that's going to be given in the job report. So we're going to have that other detail given the job report. And then I'm going to tab over here, and we're going to put the amount. The amount is going to be for the 350. So we'll put the 350. It's going to be restricted for the class. The 350, what's this going to do? Increase undeposited funds. Then the other side is going to be driven by the donation item here, which is going to be going to the contributions account, which is restricted. Also going to the class of restricted, and also affecting the job report in such a way that we're going to need to track. So we're going to say save and close. Take a look at those items. We're going to go to the trustee trial balance first, and let's make the font a little bit larger. Go into the customize reports, fonts and numbers, change the font 11. So I'm going to choose OK, yes, OK, and there we have that. So now we're going to say cash is going to be going up, but not the checking account yet. It went into undeposited funds until we make that deposit. We'll deposit them together with the last one we did. That's going to be the 350. That's going to be the sales receipt we created. Closing this back out. The other side then go into a revenue account down below. Went to the contributions restricted, now at the 911. Double clicking on that. There's going to be the 350 here for the sales receipt. Closing this back out, if we take a look at the profit and loss by job, profit and loss by job, and let's make this a little bit larger, customizing the reports, fonts, numbers, change the font size, 11's what we'll choose, OK, yes, and OK. So now we have in the restricted items, we've got that 911. Now again, it doesn't tell us what type of restriction we have here. For that, we can now track it by the jobs. That's what we're going to use the jobs report function for. So now we'll go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the company and financial. We'll go down to the profit and loss by job. Profit and loss by job, adjusting the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. Then we can adjust the size of the font, customizing the report, fonts and numbers. We're going to go to the change the font size, make it 11. OK, yes, OK. So there we have that. Now we're looking for the job reports, and now we have this donor item over here. That's what we want in the jobs field. To change that, to make this report a little bit nicer to look at for us, to give us what we need, I want to put this, read it from left to right, and therefore I'm going to go to the customer dropdown, customer center, and then I'm going to pick our jobs. I'm going to put them to the top because that'll put them on the left of our report by grabbing that little diamond, left clicking, dragging it up, not over, but up. Try that again. There it goes. And then I want to put this donor endowment into a subcategory of the jobs because that'll make it a little bit easier to see. To do that, I'm going to click on it. I'm going to pull it to the right to make it a subcategory. Then I would also like to put in the status column within this job so I can filter by it. So I'm going to go into this item then. We're going to go into the job information. I'm going to go into the job status and say in progress. And then OK. So now if I go to the profit and loss by job, we see that we have the jobs which are open. This is the ones we want. and we have the donor endowment, the pledge, and the total jobs. We have this nice filter tab. If I minimize it, there we have the jobs here. The jobs total out to that 911. That 911 ties out to the profit and loss by job, as we can see here, on profit and loss by class, but we can't see the different types of restrictions in this report. So then if we go to the profit and loss by job, we can, by simply unhiding those or maximizing them. And then these are the types of restrictions. We have the endowment. We've got the pledger 1, which was the time restriction. Now, if you don't want all this other kind of noise on the other side, we can minimize that. And also notice you have a nice double check here because it should also be recorded in the restricted items up top. That'll only work if it's notice it's going to roll out into equity, but that gives us a little bit of a double check. If you have something in the restricted items, it should be grouped in your jobs areas. That's how you can help you to track it from left to right. And if it's in unrestricted, then obviously it shouldn't be in your jobs that are restricted. It should be outside of your little field here that you can minimize. Now, the other way we can then track it is we can go to the reports up top, filters. We can filter by the job status. So scrolling down to the job status, we could say we want that. We want to then filter by the in progress jobs and then say OK. So now we've got the 3 jobs that are in progress and we can filter in that fashion as well. Now also note that we're going to need this report in order to break out the balance sheet reports between the net assets that are restricted and those that are not. And to do that, you're going to cross over to, I'm going to go to 2019 to 2020. And now we've basically got all the jobs. And if I minimize this will help me to tie out and break out what should be on the balance sheet. So for example, if I go to the reports up top, company and financial, go down to the balance sheet standard, change the date up top to 12/31/20, and then the font, customizing the font, and going to the fonts and numbers, changing the font size to 11. Okay, yes, okay. Scrolling down, then that'll help us to break out between the restricted items and the unrestricted items. Notice that this net income thing kind of throws us off. If I go to the next day up, the next year, +1, it'll then roll out. And now we're going to break out between the restricted and unrestricted. QuickBooks will roll everything into unrestricted. And then we're going to have to figure out how much should be restricted and make that allocation, make that adjustment at the end of the period. It'll be kind of our adjusting entry. Let's go back to Excel. I'm going to make this one blue and take a look at the next one. So let's make that one blue. And now we've got the next one, which is that 836. I'm going to make that green. And that one is coming from here. That's going to be the collection of pledges receivable that were unrestricted. So now we have a collection of the pledges. So we made someone pledged in the past. We collected on it. We got the money. So what's going to happen now, the cash is going to go up and the receivable is going to go down. Scrolling up, we're going to say cash is increasing, double-clicking the cash, going to the end of it, plus. So we're going to be increasing the cash. And then the pledges receivable will be going down. So pledges receivable here is an asset type of account. It should be decreasing. So I'm going to say equals, and we'll pick up the credit, making it go down. And that will put us back in balance and no effect on the income statement because we recorded the income on the pledge at the point in time that we collected it. So if we go back to QuickBooks going back to QuickBooks and go back to the home page, the form we would use to record that is going to be the receive payments. So we had an invoice in the past for the pledges, increase in the receivable and undeposited funds. We're going to then increasing the receivable and increasing some type of revenue account. Now we're going to receive the payment on it. So we're going to select this. You can imagine here we're getting the check in the mail. You can imagine we got something from the pledge. So I'm going to say it came from the pledger 1. And the amount is going to be I'm going to apply it to this invoice. So if I double click on that invoice, that's going to be the pledges. This could be, we grouped it all together here, so note that might be for multiple pledges. I'm going to close this back out, so you might have, in other words, multiple different invoices for different people for the pledges that would look similar to this. We're going to say that we received part of that invoice, not the full amount. So I'm going to go back over here and say we only got the 836 of it. So I'm going to say 836 was received. We're going to apply it against that invoice. And when I record this, what's it going to do? Debit undeposited funds, not quite in the checking account yet. Then the other side is going to be decreasing the receivable for pledges here. And note we have two receivables, so we have this drop down to indicate that. And then I'm going to say save and close, and yes. Let's go back to the profit and loss report. Profit and loss, let's go to the trial balance. Within the trial balance, we see that we have the receivable for the pledges. So we've got the pledges receivable here, double clicking on that, and we see it then going down. So it's going to be decreasing. We're going to then close that back out. The other side then going to the undeposited funds. So we have undeposited funds, double clicking on that, we see the undeposited fund. Closing this back out. Now I'm going to take everything out of undeposited fund, put it into the checking account. To do that, we're going to go to the home tab. We're going to group these together, and remember, we want to group them together as we think they'll be shown on the bank statement, so that we can make the comparison of our books to the bank statement as easy as possible. I'm going to group them together then with these three deposits at one time. Selecting this item, we're then going to select those three deposits and group them together and say OK. We're in the checking account. There's the three deposits. It totals up to 3576. That's what we expect to see on the bank statement, as opposed to these three amounts in as separate items on the bank statement. And so we want to put them in our books in the same format. What's this going to do? It's going to increase the checking account by this amount. It's going to decrease the undeposited funds. So let's go save and close. Yes. Then I'll go to the trial balance. Within the trial balance, if we scroll up the checking account, double clicking on the checking account, we see our deposit there of the 3576 and one amount, notice, and closing that back out. Undeposited funds down to 0, double clicking on it. It still breaks out in undeposited funds, so we can match out the sales receipt to the proper deposit component of the deposit. But if I select any of these items, it'll then show the full deposit here of the 3576 and the components that are decreasing the undeposited funds. Closing this back out, closing this back out.